They called it the National Ballot Security Task Force. The National Republican Party created it in 1981 for the governor's race in New Jersey, and it turned out to be trouble.
Several of these signs were reported at polling places in Newark's North Ward. Republican poll watchers, some of them off-duty policemen wearing guns and armbands, were also near the polls. It was all part of the National Ballot Security Task Force set up by the Republican national and state committees to guard against vote fraud. But Democrats charge it was a scare campaign to intimidate voters, primarily in minority neighborhoods.
The Republican candidate for governor won that year's election by less than 0.1% of the vote. But the Republican Party soon found itself in federal court over its poll watching operation. By 1982, the Republican Party had entered a legal agreement that barred it from engaging in any kind of ballot security activity for the next 35 years. However, that agreement expired in late 2017, and a federal court chose not to renew it. And that opened the way for this startling headline. Trump advisor expect more aggressive poll watching in 2020. According to the Associated Press, the Republican Party has a plan for getting back into the business of poll monitoring. Citing a senior Trump campaign advisor, the AP reports, quote, the new rules will allow the RNC to use its multi-million-dollar budget to handle those tasks and coordinate with other Republican groups on Election Day. This news comes on the heels of new reports across the country of Republican-backed efforts to purge voter rolls ahead of the 2020 presidential election. Last week in Wisconsin, a county judge sided with a conservative legal group in a lawsuit that will remove more than 200,000 voters from that state's voter rolls. The same week in Georgia, the state's Republican Secretary of State purged more than 300,000 voters from that state's voter rolls. Now, Democrats, for their part, are doing everything they can to push back against these Republican efforts. In Wisconsin, the state Democratic Party plans to use the open records law to find the names of everyone who's been purged and then work to re-enroll likely Democratic voters. Wisconsin Democratic Chairman Ben Wickler tells NBC News, quote, this is an organizing challenge, not a crisis. The purging of voters, quote, just adds to our to-do list. It's a reason to work, not to freak out. Joining us now is the man who said that, Ben Wickler, chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Ben, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Ali.
Let me ask you about that quote. You call this an organizing challenge as opposed to a crisis. That's a different way than a number of Democrats with whom we've spoken characterize this. Do you think that this is a better way for Democrats everywhere to look at these kinds of efforts, these voter purges and these other things that suppress the vote?
There's no question we're in a crisis for democracy. The question is, what do we do about it? As Democrats, I think often we have this tendency to oscillate between abject despair and euphoria. And the right place to be is on the kind of hardworking, gritty edge of anxiety, where you take what's in the world and you turn it into energy to win the election. If we get the list of purged voters and we reach out to folks, we text them, we call them, we make sure they know exactly what they need to bring to the polls. In Wisconsin, we have same-day voter registration. So we can get them back on the rolls and get them voting again in the spring of 2020 and in the fall of 2020. That's what Trump doesn't want us to do. Part of how voter suppression works is you intimidate people into not even trying to vote. So our message is, no matter what the Republicans do, show up. Come to the polls, bring all your documents, be prepared to wait in line however long it takes. We will be there to support you and help you and make sure there's plenty of pizza on hand and get your vote counted.
Does that, and I know you're not a psychologist, but does that carry the same weight as the photos, the images I showed my viewer from 1981, the idea of people in an intimidating stance, the threats, the idea that you're not going to be able to register? In other words, does the positive message that you'll send somebody perhaps on their phone, does that outweigh the efforts to intimidate people into not voting?
All the research about fear is that the opposite of fear, the way you drive out fear, is affirmation about your power and anger about what the other side is trying to do to you. Those are positive emotions. Hope and sort of righteous anger fuel the energy that we need. And so that's where my head is. I hope that's where other folks are. When you see Republicans pulling these shenanigans, purging voters, saying that they're going to ramp up these voter suppression activities, turn that into organizing energy. That's what we're doing in Wisconsin. We knocked on 54,000 doors in one weekend this past November. That's more than all of 2015 and all of 2017 combined. So I think folks are getting that message. And the key thing is to keep fueling that all the way through Election Day next year. I think if you let Republicans convince you that they're going to steal the election, then they will have stolen the election. The way that we win is by remembering that we still have the power to win. We threw out Scott Walker in Wisconsin last year, despite a ton of different attacks on voting, including harsh voter ID laws. And we can do it again with Donald Trump in 2020.
With all the talk of suppression, with all the voter ID laws, with all of the purging of voters, does it make your job when you go to somebody to register them or encourage them to vote easier or harder? Does the fact that it's out in the ether mean that you have less explaining to do to people about the fact that your right to vote, your democratic right to vote, is being meddled with by people?
Well, the fundamental thing, the idea that Americans of all races have fought and died for generations, is the idea that it should be one person, one vote, that every person should count in a democracy. And when someone attacks that, whether it's Russians or the Trump campaign or the two of them working in partnership, tacit or explicit, that pisses people off. That is a turnout force for us. And we want folks to know that their right to vote is under attack because their right is so powerful. Any voter in this election has more power to shape human history than almost anyone ever has or ever will, especially in a place like Wisconsin. A handful of voters could make the difference for every human who will ever live again. That's a huge amount of power. That's why Republicans are targeting it so intensely. And the thing we have to do is remember that we have that power and to turn that into the kind of organization, the kind of energy, the kind of turnout that the country has never seen.
Wow, that just sent chills down my spine. Any voter has the power to shape human history. I mean, you're exactly right. You're 100% right. We're seeing people in the world today taking up arms for that right. We have it. And you're just telling people they need to use it. Ben, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your efforts.
Thanks so much.
Ben Wickler. All right, more news ahead. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.